Chapter 5. Fractured Flames. Dawn broke over Pyreholm like a fever. Harsh amber light filtering through windows still hazed with smoke from the previous night's celebrations. Lyra stood in her tower study, watching the city slowly emerge from darkness, her body aching from the strain of the midnight procession. The necklace at her throat pulsed with subdued warmth, like embers banking themselves in preparation for a greater conflagration. They had survived the night. Barely. Alek's working through the 5 ceremonial gates had proceeded according to his design. Elaborate flame manipulations at each point of the pentagram he had created across Pyreholm's layout, drawing increasing magical power from guild ley lines as they progressed. With each gate, he had directed their joined magic with growing intensity, channeling energy through the necklace to access her ancestral connections. And at each gate, the moon opal had diverted a portion of that flow away from his control, redirecting it through the connection she shared with Cassius instead. The spirit seer had absorbed and dispersed the redirected power from his position in the Ember Sanctuary, preventing Alek from completing whatever final working the Crown of Cinders required. The victory had been invisible to observers. The procession appeared flawlessly executed, each ceremonial flame ignited with impressive displays that drew appreciative responses from the crowds. Even the guild elders had been oblivious to the magical battle occurring beneath the surface performance. But Alek had sensed something amiss. At the 5th and final gate, his golden eyes had narrowed with unmistakable suspicion as the culminating working failed to achieve its intended effect. He had maintained his public composure, of course, too calculating to reveal frustration before witnesses, but his fingers had tightened around hers with bruising force as they completed the ritual.
Something interfered,
He had whispered as they descended from the final platform, his voice pitched for her ears alone.
The flow diverted somehow. We'll need to adjust our approach for tomorrow's ceremony.
Tomorrow's ceremony. The engagement ritual that would formalize their union before the assembled guild hierarchy. The event now merely hours away. A soft knock at her door interrupted these grim reflections. Lyra straightened, adjusting her robe, a simple garment she had changed into after returning exhausted from the procession, lacking energy for proper night clothes.
"Enter,"
she called, expecting a servant with morning refreshments. Instead, Zara slipped through the door, closing it quietly behind her. Her festival finery had been replaced with practical day attire, though her eyes carried the shadowed evidence of too little sleep.
"You look about as rested as I feel,"
she observed, moving to stand beside Lyra at the window.
"Sleep proved elusive,"
Lyra admitted.
"Too much to consider before sunset."
Sunset. The traditional time for Fire Guild engagement ceremonies, when the waning light would give way to magically enhanced flames symbolizing the couple's united power, illuminating the coming darkness. A poetic image rendered sinister by current circumstances.
"I spoke with your father after the procession,"
Zara said, getting directly to the reason for her early visit.
"He sensed something unusual about the final gate working, though he couldn't identify precisely what. I suggested that Alek's innovative route design might have created unexpected magical resonances with older city ley lines."
Lyra appreciated her friend's quick thinking.
A plausible explanation that deflects suspicion while acknowledging the obvious disruption. Did he accept it?
"Conditionally,"
Zara replied with a grimace.
"He's concerned enough to have ordered additional security for today's ceremony, but not convinced of active interference. Your performance was convincing. He saw nothing in your behavior to suggest anything beyond normal bridal nervousness."
The necklace pulsed gently against Lyra's throat, as if reminding her of its continued influence despite the moon opal's intervention. She touched it absently, feeling the small, cool spot where the spirit stone nestled against the central fire opal.
"And our spirit seer friend?"
Zara asked, her tone deliberately casual even as her eyes sharpened with interest.
Alive, I presume, though I haven't seen him since before the procession.
Lyra tried to match Zara's casual tone, but heard the edge of concern that crept into her voice.
The working was intense. He absorbed considerable magical backlash through our connection.
The memory sent a phantom echo of pain through her. Not her own suffering, but Cassius's, experienced through the link they had established. Each gate's diverted energy had struck him with increasing force. The final one so powerful she had physically flinched despite her careful performance.
We need to meet with him,
Zara stated practically.
before the engagement ceremony. If Alek intends to attempt a more forceful working tonight.
A second knock interrupted her, this one firmer than Zara's had been. Both women tensed, exchanging wary glances.
Yes?
Lyra called, subtly positioning herself between Zara and the door.
Diplomatic message for Magister Embersong.
Came the formal response of a guild attendant.
From the Spirit Guild envoy.
Relief coursed through her, though she maintained her composed expression as she opened the door to accept the sealed parchment from the young attendant. Only after closing the door again did she allow her fingers to tremble slightly as they broke the simple wax seal. A crescent moon impressed with no identifying marks. Nothing that would connect it specifically to Cassius. The message inside was brief, written in elegant script that somehow captured the writer's personality in its precise yet fluid lines. Green Arbor. 3rd hour past dawn. Matter of historical significance requires consultation. No signature, no personal comments, nothing that would raise suspicions if intercepted. Just a straightforward request for a meeting that any diplomatic envoy might send to a guild representative.
Historical significance indeed,
Zara murmured, reading over Lyra's shoulder.
The Green Arbor is rarely used this early in the year.
Which makes it perfect for a private meeting.
Lyra noted, already calculating timing.
Minimal staff, few visitors, plenty of secluded alcoves designed for quiet conversation.
And conveniently located between the main guild complex and the diplomatic quarter, giving all parties legitimate reason to be in the vicinity.
Zara nodded appreciatively.
Your spirit seer thinks strategically.
He's not my spirit seer.
Lyra replied automatically, though the necklace warmed slightly against her skin as if objecting to this denial. Zara's knowing expression suggested she found the correction unconvincing, but kindly refrained from saying so.
We have roughly 2 hours before the meeting. You should eat something and prepare for the day ahead. I'll arrange a plausible reason for our presence in the Green Arbor. Perhaps a final consultation on floral arrangements for the ceremony.
The pragmatic approach to their conspiracy grounded Lyra, pulling her from the fatigued spiral of worry that had occupied her since returning from the procession. This was merely another problem to solve, another obstacle to navigate, albeit one with exceptionally high stakes.
Thank you,
she said simply, the words encompassing more than just the immediate assistance. Zara squeezed her arm gently.
Save your thanks for when we've freed you from both the necklace and the engagement. Until then, consider it enlightened self-interest. I refuse to attend weekly dinners with Lord Brightforge as your husband for the next 50 years.
The moment of humor eased the tension that had settled between Lyra's shoulders. She managed a genuine smile as Zara departed to make arrangements, leaving her to prepare for the meeting ahead. As she bathed and dressed, selecting attire appropriate for a bride-to-be attending to final ceremony details, Lyra found her thoughts returning repeatedly to Cassius. The connection between them remained present, but quiescent. A background awareness rather than active communication. Was he recovering from the magical exertion of countering Alek's working? Had he learned something new about the Crown of Cinders? Was he reconsidering their unlikely alliance given the increasingly dangerous circumstances? This last question carried a weight beyond strategic concerns, touching something deeper that Lyra wasn't entirely prepared to examine. The necklace pulsed sharply in response to this direction of thought, sending a brief wave of heat through her body as if to remind her where her focus should remain. By the time she was fully dressed in a formal day ensemble of deep burgundy appropriate for pre-wedding activities, the third hour past dawn approached. Lyra departed her tower, moving with composed purpose through corridors already busy with ceremony preparations. Guild members offered congratulations as she passed. Servants curtsied more deeply than usual. Even elder mages nodded respectfully at the day's honored daughter. All these interactions required appropriate responses: gracious acknowledgments, dignified appreciation, modest acceptance of good wishes, a performance as demanding in its way as the magical workings of the procession had been. By the time she reached the main courtyard where Zara awaited, Lyra felt the strain of maintaining her public persona like a physical weight.
Ready to select the final floral elements for your engagement celebration?
Zara asked brightly, loud enough for nearby guild officials to overhear as she linked her arm through Lyra's.
I trust your judgment completely.
Lyra replied with matching volume, playing her role in their cover story.
Though perhaps the fire lilies rather than ember blossoms for the central arrangements.
The meaningless discussion of flowers continued as they crossed the courtyard toward the green arbor. A large botanical garden enclosed within elaborate glasswork that regulated temperature and humidity for plants requiring milder conditions than Pyreholm's standard volcanic heat. True to Zara's prediction, the arbor stood nearly empty this early in the season. A handful of gardeners worked in distant sections, pruning winter growth and preparing beds for spring planting. The central areas with their winding paths and secluded seating alcoves remained unoccupied, perfect for a clandestine meeting. They followed the main path until reaching a junction marked by a statue of Valia Flameheart, the legendary botanist who had first developed heat-resistant hybrid plants suitable for Fire Guild territories. There they turned right, following a narrower path toward what garden designs delicately called contemplation spaces. Small clearings surrounded by dense foliage that ensured privacy for conversations requiring discretion. The third such space, counting from the statue as common garden etiquette dictated, revealed Cassius already waiting, seated on a stone bench partially obscured by cascading vines with copper-colored leaves. He rose as they approached, his formal Spirit Guild robes replaced with simpler attire of midnight blue that would attract less attention in public settings. Lyra's initial relief at seeing him upright and apparently whole quickly gave way to concern as she noted the shadows beneath his violet eyes, the careful way he held himself, the slight pallor beneath his normally warm complexion. The magical backlash he had absorbed during the procession had clearly exacted a significant physical toll.
You're injured,
she stated without preamble as they entered the clearing, magical senses immediately detecting the remnants of spiritual damage beneath his composed exterior.
I'm recovering.
He corrected mildly, inclining his head in formal greeting to them both.
Spirit healing techniques are quite effective for magical drainage, though they require time to complete their work.
Zara assessed him with a critical eye.
You look like someone tried to extinguish you,
she observed bluntly.
Did you sleep at all after the procession?
A hint of wry amusement touched his expression.
Sleep and healing trance aren't precisely the same thing, but yes, I've rested. My condition won't impede our immediate concerns.
The business-like exchange established their priorities clearly. Personal well-being secondary to the urgent situation they faced. Lyra respected this approach, even as part of her wish to insist on better care for his obvious injuries.
We have until sunset,
she said instead, focusing on their limited time frame.
The engagement ceremony begins at dusk, and will likely serve as Alek's second attempt to activate whatever working the Crown of Cinders requires.
With adjustments to counter the interference he encountered during the procession,
Cassius agreed, his voice taking on a scholar's precision despite his evident fatigue.
the Moon Opal's intervention was effective, but not invisible to his perception. He'll be watching for similar disruptions.
The necklace pulsed warmly against Lyra's throat, as if acknowledging this assessment. She touched it reflexively, fingers finding the small, cool spot where the spirit stone nestled against the central fire opal.
About that,
Cassius continued, his violet eyes tracking her gesture with concern.
the moon opal should be removed before the ceremony.
Removed.
Lyra echoed, alarm rising within her.
But it's our primary defense against the necklace's influence on my ancestral connections.
And will be immediately detected if left in place.
He explained gently.
Alek knows something interfered with his working last night. The first thing he'll check is the necklace itself. Anything visibly different will confirm his suspicions and potentially expose our countermeasures before they can be effective.
The logic was undeniable, however unwelcome. Lyra's fingers pressed against the small stone, reluctant to surrender even this partial protection.
Without it, the necklace's enchantment will have unobstructed access to my ancestral pathways.
Not entirely unobstructed,
Cassius countered, his expression thoughtful.
the connection we established creates an alternative channel that exists independently of the physical stone. The moon opal facilitated that connection's integration with the necklace's enchantment, but removing it now won't completely undo what's already been established.
Zara looked between them with sharp interest.
This connection you keep mentioning, what exactly does it entail? How was it created?
A faint color touched Cassius's cheekbones, nearly imperceptible beneath his already strained appearance.
A temporary alignment of magical signatures.
He explained, the technical description deliberately understating the experience's intimate nature.
It allows for shared awareness of certain magical currents, particularly those involving ancestral energies.
Very temporary, I'm sure.
Zara murmured, her knowing tone making Lyra grateful for the decorative vines partially shadowing her own warming face.
The point
Lyra redirected firmly.
is that removing the moon opal will weaken our defenses, while potentially preserving the element of surprise. A strategic withdrawal, rather than complete surrender.
Precisely.
Cassius agreed, looking grateful for the return to practical matters.
And it creates an opportunity to introduce a different countermeasure during the ceremony itself. One Alek won't be watching for because he'll believe he's already identified and eliminated the previous interference.
The necklace pulsed against Lyra's throat, more sharply this time, as if objecting to this planning. She reinforced her mental shield automatically, an action that didn't escape Cassius's notice.
The spirit shield is holding?
He asked, professional concern momentarily overriding their strategic discussion.
Yes, though it requires more conscious reinforcement without the moon opal's support.
Lyra admitted.
The necklace's physical effects remain challenging, but my thoughts stay clear.
She didn't elaborate on the nature of those challenging effects. The waves of inappropriate heat that cascaded through her body at unpredictable intervals. The artificially induced physical responses that required constant management. The exhausting division between mind and body that the enchantment enforced. Cassius likely understood already, and explaining to Zara would only heighten everyone's discomfort with no strategic benefit.
So we remove the moon opal
Zara summarized practically.
and implement a different countermeasure during the ceremony. What exactly did you have in mind?
Cassius reached into his robes, withdrawing a small velvet pouch.
Something that builds on what we've learned about the Crown of Cinders' original design.
He loosened the pouch's drawstring, tipping its contents into his palm. 2 tiny crystals, each no larger than a grain of rice. 1 silver, 1 pale blue.
Spirit dust.
Lyra identified immediately. Her scholarly interest piqued despite their dire circumstances.
Crystallized elemental essence used in pre-separation rituals.
You recognize it.
Cassius observed, looking impressed.
Few fire mages study such artifacts, even academically.
Few fire mages maintain illegal collections of cross-elemental texts.
Zara commented dryly.
Our Lyra has always been exceptional.
The casual reference to our Lyra didn't escape Cassius's notice. A slight shift in his expression suggesting he noted both the possessive phrasing and its implicit categorization of Lyra as somehow belonging to the Fire Guild, rather than existing between worlds as their connection had briefly allowed.
The spirit dust represents the 2 remaining elemental components required for the crown's original balanced function.
He explained, focusing on the crystals in his palm.
Spirit and air. Combined with fire, earth, and water, the elements Alek already possesses in his incomplete crown, they should theoretically create a proper elemental pentad.
Creating balance rather than dominance.
Lyra recalled from their ancestral communication.
But how would we introduce these into whatever working Alek attempts during the ceremony?
That's where your unprecedented control over fire illusion becomes essential.
Cassius said, meeting her eyes directly for the first time since they'd entered the clearing.
The crystals need to be introduced directly into the ceremonial flame at the precise moment Alek attempts to channel your ancestral connections through the incomplete crown.
The necklace pulsed sharply against Lyra's throat, as if recognizing this plan as a genuine threat to its function. She ignored the resulting wave of heat that coursed through her body, focusing instead on the practical implications of what Cassius suggested.
The engagement ritual includes a combined flame working similar to those we performed during the procession,
she confirmed, mentally reviewing the traditional ceremony.
But adding foreign elements to consecrated fire during a formal guild ritual would be immediately visible to everyone present. Alek, the elders, my father.
Not if concealed within an illusory construct that appears to be pure flame manipulation.
Cassius countered.
Your reputation for creating detailed fire patterns provides perfect cover for introducing the crystals without detection.
Zara's expression shifted from skepticism to consideration.
It could work with the phoenix illusion,
she acknowledged.
Lyra's fire manipulation is precise enough to conceal practically anything within the patterns.
But how will we get the spirit dust past the nude requirement of the engagement ritual?
Lyra asked, remembering the traditional protocol.
Both bride and groom wear only the magical fire we conjure. No clothing, no jewelry apart from family heirlooms, and...
She touched the necklace at her throat.
Gifts from the betrothed.
I can handle that part.
Zara volunteered immediately.
As maid of honor, I'll be with you during the purification ritual. I can slip you the crystals just before you enter the ceremonial circle. No one watches that final moment of preparation quite as closely as they think they do.
The straightforward problem-solving approach helped maintain focus on practical matters, rather than the looming personal implications of their situation. If they succeeded, Lyra would effectively sabotage her own engagement ceremony before the assembled guild hierarchy. If they failed, she would be bound to Alek through both political marriage and magical manipulation, becoming an unwilling conduit for whatever working the incomplete Crown of Cinders was designed to perform.
There's another complication,
Cassius said, his tone shifting to something more hesitant.
The spirit dust requires activation by all 5 elemental affinities to function properly. Alek already controls fire, earth, and likely water components based on what we have learned about his incomplete crown. You naturally provide fire and ancestral connection. I can contribute spirit affinity from a distance, similar to last night's intervention.
That leaves air unaccounted for,
Lyra noted, immediately seeing the problem.
None of us has air affinity, and we can hardly invite an air guild representative to participate in disrupting a fire guild ceremony.
Actually,
Zara interjected, looking somewhat uncomfortable.
That might not be entirely accurate.
Both Lyra and Cassius turned to her with questioning expressions.
My mother's family includes Air Guild heritage,
Zara admitted reluctantly.
3 generations back, before the stricter separation policies were enforced. It's not something we discuss publicly for obvious reasons, but I've always had certain affinities that don't align perfectly with typical fire manifestations.
This revelation surprised Lyra despite their years of friendship. Guild society deeply stigmatized mixed elemental heritage, particularly among higher-ranking families. That Zara had kept this secret even from her closest friend made perfect sense, but created a poignant reminder of how thoroughly the separation ideology had infiltrated even their private relationship.
That's extremely fortunate,
Cassius said without a hint of judgment, his focus entirely on the practical benefit rather than social implications.
Even distant air affinity should be sufficient to activate that component of the spirit dust.
The necklace at Lyra's throat pulsed again. more aggressively this time, as if sensing the increasing threat to its function. This pulse carried a different quality than previous ones, sharper, more focused, with an almost probing sensation that suggested the enchantment was actively searching for information, rather than merely attempting to influence her emotions. Cassius noticed her momentary discomfort immediately, his violet eyes narrowing with concern.
The necklace is becoming more reactive,
He observed.
It may be developing awareness beyond its original programming.
Awareness?
Zara repeated, alarmed.
You mean it's sentient?
Not independently sentient.
Cassius clarified.
But enchantments this sophisticated can develop response patterns that simulate limited awareness, particularly when connected to ancestral magics with their own forms of consciousness.
The implication sent a chill through Lyra, despite the necklace's persistent warmth. The idea that the jewelry might be learning, adapting to their countermeasures rather than simply executing its original function, added a disturbing new dimension to their already complex situation.
We should remove the moon opal now,
She decided, fingers rising to the necklace.
If the enchantment is developing increased sensitivity, we can't risk it detecting the stone's presence when Alek examines it before the ceremony.
Cassius nodded, moving closer to assist.
This will be icky uncomfortable.
He warned.
The necklace will perceive the removal as a victory and likely intensify its influence temporarily.
Meaning what exactly?
Zara asked, her protective instincts visibly rising.
Increased physical effects.
Lyra answered before Cassius could, preferring to define the parameters herself.
The enchantment primarily works through artificially induced physical responses that it attempts to connect to emotional states. Without the moon opal's interference, those responses will intensify until my system adjusts to the change.
This clinical description deliberately understated what she anticipated. Waves of inappropriate heat, an artificially induced desire that would make maintaining composure challenging at best. But such effects could be managed, at least temporarily, with sufficient determination and the spirit shield protecting her conscious thoughts.
I can create a privacy ward.
Cassius offered, recognizing the potential for embarrassment in what would follow.
To contain any visible magical fluctuations during the transition.
At Lyra's nod, he traced a simple pattern in the air, establishing a shimmering boundary around their small clearing that would blur both sight and sound to anyone outside its perimeter. The working appeared effortless despite his obvious fatigue, a testament to his skill even in weakened condition. Lyra touched the necklace, fingers finding the small gap where the moon opal nestled against the central fire opal.
How exactly do I remove it? It's wedged quite firmly in place.
Allow me.
Cassius said, stepping closer with professional focus that partially masked his awareness of the personal boundary being crossed.
The stone responds to spirit magic more readily than fire.
He raised his hand, not quite touching the necklace but positioning his fingers near the junction where the two stones met. His violet eyes took on that now familiar clouded appearance of spirit sight as he focused on the magical structure rather than physical form.
There,
He murmured after a moment.
the moon opal created its own channel within the enchantment. I can use that pathway to guide it out without disrupting the surrounding structure.
As he worked, Lyra became acutely aware of his proximity. The clean herbal scent of his robes, the slight warmth radiating from his skin despite spirit mage's typically cooler presence. The careful control evident in every small movement of his fingers. The necklace pulsed against her throat, objecting to his closeness with increasing heat that she struggled to ignore.
Almost.
Cassius said, his concentration unwavering despite what must have been obvious awareness of her discomfort.
The enchantment is attempting to reseal the gap. One moment.
A final gesture of his fingers accompanied by a word spoken in ancient spirit tongue, and suddenly the moon opal detached, floating free of the necklace to hover briefly in the air between them, before settling gently into his waiting palm. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. With the spirit stone's interference removed, the necklace's enchantment surged through its original channels with renewed intensity. Waves of heat cascaded through Lyra's body, so powerful that her knees nearly buckled. Her vision blurred momentarily, her breath coming in short gasps as she struggled to remain upright. Through sheer will, she maintained her dignified posture, refusing to surrender to the enchantment's renewed attack despite its brutal intensity.
Lyra?
Zara's concerned voice seemed to come from a great distance.
I'm fine.
She managed, the words emerging steadier than she felt.
The effect is significant but manageable. Give me a moment.
Cassius had stepped back immediately after extracting the moon opal, maintaining a respectful distance that helped more than he could know. His proximity during the removal had been necessary, but had intensified the necklace's reaction considerably. Now, with physical space between them, she found it marginally easier to separate the enchantment's artificial responses from her genuine experiences.
The spirit shield is holding,
He observed, studying her with professional concern rather than personal discomfort.
Your magical resistance is remarkable.
The simple acknowledgement of her strength rather than pity for her vulnerability helped Lyra center herself more quickly. She took several measured breaths, focusing on controlling her physical responses while maintaining her mental barriers.
It's done.
She stated finally, her voice nearly normal despite the continued waves of sensation coursing through her body.
And you should keep the stone. Its connection to the necklace's enchantment makes it too dangerous for me to carry.
Cassius nodded, tucking the moon opal securely into an inner pocket of his robes.
The removal has actually taught us something valuable.
He noted, his scholarly mindset finding opportunity even in adversity.
The necklace's reaction confirms it perceives our intervention as significant threat rather than minor inconvenience. Whatever Alek intends to accomplish during the engagement ceremony, our interference during the procession genuinely disrupted his working, rather than merely delaying it.
Small comfort if he succeeds tonight instead.
Zara commented, though the observation carried no defeatism, merely practical assessment.
We won't let that happen.
Lyra stated, strength returning to her voice as the initial shock of the moon opal's removal began to stabilize into a manageable new equilibrium. The necklace still pulsed with aggressive warmth, but its effects, while intense, were becoming familiar enough to function through. Their determination resonated with sobering awareness of what failure would mean, not just for Lyra personally, but potentially for the wider magical balance the ancestors had warned was at risk. The Crown of Cinders, even in incomplete form, clearly represented power beyond ordinary magical workings. Power Alek sought to control through her ancestral connections without proper elemental balance. As they finalized the details of their plan for the ceremony, Lyra found herself increasingly aware of a growing distance between herself and Cassius. A subtle withdrawal that had nothing to do with physical proximity and everything to do with the realities their situation illuminated. Whatever connection they had discovered in the Ember Sanctuary, whatever resonance had formed between their supposedly incompatible magical affinities, existed in direct opposition to centuries of elemental separation. Their brief partnership, however profound its impact on her understanding of magical possibility, represented a challenge to the entire foundation of guild society. Even if they succeeded tonight, even if they exposed Alek's manipulation, prevented the corrupted crown working, and somehow extracted Lyra from both the enchanted necklace and unwanted engagement. What then? A Fire Guild Magister and Spirit Guild Seer, fundamentally aligned yet separated by every social structure and political reality of their world. The necklace pulsed against her throat, as if sensing and encouraging this line of thought that led away from Cassius and toward acceptance of existing boundaries. For once, its influence aligned with practical reality rather than opposing it, making the enchantment's manipulation particularly insidious.
We should separate until the ceremony.
Cassius said finally, giving voice to what they all recognized as necessary.
My continued proximity only strengthens the necklace's reactions, making it harder for you to maintain composure. And we all have preparations to make before sunset.
Agreed.
Lyra replied, her voice carefully neutral despite the complex emotions beneath.
Zara will deliver the spirit dust before the ceremony. I'll create an illusory construct complex enough to disguise its introduction into the ceremonial flame. You'll maintain distance, while extending protective workings similar to last night's intervention.
The clinical summary stripped their plan to its essential components, removing all personal implications from what had become dangerously intimate collaboration. This deliberate distancing felt necessary, yet painful. A practical acknowledgement of boundaries they had temporarily transcended through magical connection, but which reasserted themselves with mundane inevitability in daylight.
Until sunset, then.
Cassius said quietly, the formal phrase carrying layers of meaning beyond its simple words.
Until sunset,
Lyra confirmed, meeting his violet eyes one last time before he dissolved the privacy ward with a gesture and departed the clearing, his midnight blue attire disappearing among the copper-leafed vines as completely as their momentary connection seemed to fade in the face of practical reality. Zara waited until he had truly gone before speaking, her expression uncharacteristically serious.
You care for him?
It wasn't a question, and Lyra didn't treat it as one.
it doesn't matter.
She replied, touching the necklace that symbolized all the constraints binding her to a path divergent from whatever possibilities that care might have suggested.
We have a ceremony to disrupt and a magical working to prevent. Personal feelings are irrelevant.
They're never irrelevant,
Zara countered gently.
just occasionally inconvenient to larger purposes.
The simple observation carried more understanding than Lyra had expected. Recognition that duty and desire often stood in opposition, particularly for those born to positions of responsibility. It was why their friendship had endured where others faltered. Zara saw the person beneath the High Councilor's daughter without dismissing the reality of what that position demanded.
One impossible problem at a time.
Lyra said, straightening her posture with renewed determination.
First, we prevent Alek from using me as a conduit for whatever the incomplete crown is designed to do. Then we address the necklace's enchantment. Everything else comes after those priorities are resolved.
If those priorities could be resolved. If they prevented the ceremony's magical working without exposing themselves in the process. If they found a way to remove the necklace without requiring Alek's cooperation or resorting to fatal measures. If they navigated the political fallout of a broken engagement between two of the Fire Guild's most prominent families. So many ifs, each more daunting than the last. And beneath them all, the quiet awareness that even success would likely end whatever connection had begun to form between a fire magister with unorthodox research interests and a spirit seer with radical theories about elemental compatibility. The necklace pulsed once more against Lyra's throat as they left the Green Arbor, returning to their expected roles in preparation for the evening's ceremony. Its heat seemed almost triumphant now, as if recognizing that practical reality had accomplished what magical manipulation alone could not, creating distance between potential partners whose connection threatened existing power structures. Sunset approached with inexorable certainty, bringing with it a ceremony that would either bind Lyra permanently to Alek's influence or set her on a path of open defiance against guild expectations. Neither option offered clear resolution to the connection she had discovered with Cassius, a possibility glimpsed briefly before being subsumed by larger concerns and practical impossibilities. Some flames, however genuine their initial spark, faced too many obstacles to sustain themselves against opposing currents. This recognition settled within Lyra alongside her determination to prevent Alek's magical working. A private acknowledgement that certain victories might require personal sacrifices beyond the immediate crisis. The engagement ceremony awaited. Whatever came after would have to be addressed once that imminent threat was resolved. If it could be resolved at all. Midday sun streamed through the tower windows, bathing Lyra's study in harsh amber light that seemed to mock her darkening thoughts. She stood before the obsidian mirror, studying the necklace at her throat with critical intensity, not admiring its beauty, but seeking weaknesses in its construction. Without the moon opal's intervention, the fire opals pulsed with renewed vigor, sending periodic waves of heat through her body that made concentration difficult. The necklace bound her to Alek in ways both magical and physical. Until it was removed, she remained vulnerable to its influence regardless of whatever success they might achieve during the engagement ceremony. Breaking the enchantment had become her primary concern after preventing the crown's activation.
There must be a way,
she murmured, fingers probing the seamless metal where the clasp had once been. The enchantment had sealed the necklace into an unbroken circle, with no visible mechanism for removal. Cassius had explained the limitations clearly. Either Alek willingly removed the enchantment, or it would persist until her death. Neither option seemed particularly promising at present. The former required manipulating a master manipulator. The latter was obviously unacceptable. Perhaps if she feigned surrender, Lyra thought. If she abandoned resistance and pretended total submission to Alek's influence, he might believe the necklace had fulfilled its purpose and remove it himself. The necklace flared with sudden heat at this thought, sending a jolt of inappropriate pleasure through her body so intense it made her gasp. The reaction wasn't random. It was responding specifically to her strategizing, as if recognizing and punishing thoughts of deception against its master. Lyra steadied herself against the mirror's frame until the sensation subsided. The spirit shield protected her thoughts from manipulation, but the physical effects remained beyond her control. Each time she contemplated methods of removal, the necklace reacted more aggressively, making sustained planning increasingly difficult. She tried a different approach. Perhaps there was some ancient counter-enchantment, some magical means of breaking the binding without Alek's cooperation. Her research into forbidden cross-elemental techniques might provide insights traditional fire magic lacked. Another surge of heat, another wave of unwanted physical response that made her fingers tighten against the frame. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she fought to maintain her focus despite the artificial sensations cascading through her body. What about her father? If she could somehow prove the necklace's nature to him, surely the High Councilor would intervene against such forbidden magic, regardless of political consequences. The necklace's response was almost vicious this time, heat pooling low in her abdomen with such intensity that her knees nearly buckled. The message was clear. Any thought of exposing Alek or seeking help would be met with increasing distraction.
Clever,
Lyra whispered, both impressed and appalled by the enchantment's sophisticated design. It functioned like a training mechanism, rewarding thoughts that aligned with Alek's interests while punishing those that opposed them, gradually conditioning her responses through physical means, even while her mind remained her own. She straightened, forcing herself to breathe evenly despite the lingering sensations. The necklace's aggressive responses actually confirmed something important. It recognized genuine threats, reacting most strongly to strategies that might actually succeed. This pattern could potentially be useful, revealing through its very resistance which approaches Alek would find most concerning. A knock at her door interrupted these reflections.
Magister Embersong,
called a servant's voice.
The preparation team has arrived for your ceremonial attire fitting.
Lyra composed herself quickly, pushing aside her increasingly desperate contemplations about the necklace. The engagement ceremony approached with relentless certainty, and maintaining appearances until then remained essential.
Enter,
she called, turning from the mirror with practiced poise. The door swung open to reveal a flurry of activity as a half-dozen guild attendants entered, bearing various ceremonial items required for the evening's ritual. Among them, Lyra spotted Zara, her presence explained by her official role in the ceremony, but her eyes conveying silent communication beyond the servant's understanding.
Magister Embersong.
The preparation team's leader greeted her with a formal bow.
We bring the traditional elements for your transformation ceremony. High Councilor Embersong requests that fitting begin immediately to ensure all is perfect for sunset.
And so it began. The elaborate preparation process that would continue without interruption until the ceremony itself. Traditionally, this reflected the bride's journey from individual to partner, each ritual element symbolizing aspects of the transformation. Today, it felt more like a countdown to confrontation, each completed preparation bringing her closer to the moment when their plan would either succeed or fail catastrophically. The afternoon passed in a whirlwind of activity, allowing Lyra little time to dwell on either her uncertain future or the necklace's persistent physical assault on her concentration. Guild traditions demanded specific preparations, each laden with symbolism that seemed particularly ironic given her true intentions for the ceremony. First came the ancestral blessing ritual, where Lyra knelt in the family's private chapel, while female relatives recited traditional invocations, asking their forebears to witness and approve the union. Her father's sister, Marina, led the proceedings, her formal intonation masking the political satisfaction this alliance brought to the Embersong faction within the guild.
The ancestors smile upon this union,
Aunt Marina declared after the ritual's completion, though Lyra knew from their seance in the Ember Sanctuary that the ancestors felt quite differently about Alek's intentions. Next came the purification ceremony, conducted in the bathhouse where heated volcanic springs created naturally warmed pools. Female attendants scrubbed Lyra with traditional herbs and oils meant to cleanse both body and magical essence in preparation for the union of fire signatures that would occur during the engagement.
You must be pristine,
Explained the elderly bathhouse matron as she inspected Lyra's skin with critical attention.
for tonight you become a vessel for unified flame.
The choice of words, vessel, sent an uncomfortable shiver through Lyra that had nothing to do with the necklace's enchantment. How telling that traditional language framed her role not as equal partner, but as container for something greater than herself. Throughout these preparations, Lyra caught occasional glimpses of activity related to the larger ceremony. Guild officials directed servants arranging the grand ceremonial hall. Musicians practiced traditional melodies that would accompany specific ritual moments. Fire artificers tested the central basin where the binding flame would be conjured. And 3 times, she saw Cassius, always at a distance, always engaged in seemingly diplomatic activities that provided legitimate reason for his presence during festival celebrations. The first sighting came as she crossed the main courtyard between ritual locations. He stood with several guild elders, apparently explaining some aspect of spirit magic with scholarly detachment. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, no recognition showing in his public expression, though she felt a subtle pulse through their established connection that suggested awareness beyond the visual acknowledgement. The second glimpse occurred as attendants rushed her through the eastern corridor toward the next preparation. Cassius was consulting a historical text with one of the archive keepers, his finger tracing something on an ancient map of Pyreholm. He looked up just as she passed, the movement so subtle it would appear coincidental to any observer. The necklace pulsed with aggressive heat at even this momentary connection. The third and final sighting proved most significant. As Lyra was escorted toward the bride's preparation chamber for the final rituals before the ceremony, she passed the entrance to the northeastern conservatory. Cassius stood just inside, apparently admiring a rare flame blossom display. This time, he spoke a single sentence, pitched precisely to reach her ears without appearing to address her directly.
I'll know the moment.
He said, his attention seemingly fixed on the flowers.
Trust our connection.
The necklace flared painfully hot against her throat. recognizing the significance of this communication, even as the attending servants remained oblivious. Lyra maintained her composed expression through sheer will, offering no response but feeling a curious certainty settle within her. Whatever happened in the hours ahead, she would not face it entirely alone. By late afternoon, Lyra found herself in the bride's preparation chamber, a circular room near the grand ceremonial hall specifically designed for final ritual readiness. Windows facing westward allowed the setting sun's light to illuminate the space with increasingly reddened glow as dusk approached. Here, the most intimate preparations would occur. Here, clan women from both families would perform the ancient assessment ritual that tradition demanded before any formal union. Here, Lyra would conjure the living flame attire that would clothe her during the ceremony itself. Zara arrived with the final preparation team, her official role as supporting friend explaining her presence while allowing the crucial exchange they had planned. As attendants busied themselves with various ritual arrangements, she approached Lyra under pretense of adjusting her hair.
Everything is prepared,
She murmured, her fingers working through Lyra's flame-red locks with practiced efficiency.
Cassius reached the Ember Sanctuary without detection. He'll monitor through your connection and activate his portion of the working when you introduce the spirit dust.
Do you have the dust?
Lyra asked quietly, maintaining a pleasant expression for any observers.
I have it secure,
Zara confirmed.
I'll slip it to you as we walk to the ceremonial fire brazier. I've also positioned myself near your father during the ceremony. If things progress as planned, I'll direct his attention to specific evidence of Alek's working.
Their conversation ended as the chamber doors swung open to admit the female representatives from Alek's family. 3 women of varying ages, all bearing the distinctive copper-gold hair and proud bearing of the Brightforge line. Leading them was Safina Brightforge, Alek's mother, her elegant features set in an expression of calculated assessment barely softened by ceremonial politeness.
Magister Embersong.
She greeted Lyra with a formal nod that acknowledged position without conveying genuine warmth.
The sun approaches the horizon. It is time for the witnessing.
The witnessing. One of the oldest and most uncomfortable traditions in Fire Guild marriages. A ritual holdover from times when familial alliances were evaluated primarily for reproductive potential, rather than magical or political advantage. Though modernized in language, the core remained unchanged. The bride must be examined, literally and physically, by female representatives of the groom's family. Attendants from both houses withdrew to the chamber's perimeter, leaving only Lyra, Zara as her witness, and the 3 Brightforge women in the center of the room. Reddening sunlight streamed through the windows, casting everyone in flame-like illumination as tradition demanded for this particular ritual.
Disrobe.
Safina instructed, no embarrassment or hesitation in her tone.
The witnessing must be conducted properly.
Lyra had anticipated this moment, had mentally prepared for it as part of her public role, yet still found it requiring significant will to comply with dignity rather than rebellious refusal. With practiced composure, she unfastened her preparation robe and let it fall to the floor, standing nude before the evaluating eyes of her future mother-in-law. The necklace remained at her throat, the only adornment permitted during this ritual, a visible symbol of Alek's claim upon her that seemed particularly pointed given the circumstances. It pulsed with gentle warmth now, as if approving this submission to tradition that brought his plans closer to fruition. Safina circled Lyra slowly, her gaze clinical rather than cruel, yet still carrying the uncomfortable weight of assessment applied to breeding stock rather than human partnership. The other Brightforge women, an aunt and cousin, Lyra had been informed, maintained their positions, observing with similar detachment.
Good bone structure.
Safina noted, addressing her family members rather than Lyra herself.
Strong without being masculine. The Embersong line has always produced physically resilient offspring.
She reached up to touch a lock of Lyra's hair, the gesture intimate despite its clinical nature.
Her hair is a fiery cascade, a striking shade of red that one might find in embers after a fierce fire has burned out.
Safina continued, her voice softening slightly with approval.
It shines like polished copper, reflecting light from all angles and gleaming beneath the sun's caress.
Lyra stood still, feeling each word resonate through her body as though it were a touch, her cheeks flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and pride at the praise for her most distinguishing feature. Safina began to circle Lyra once more, this time focusing on her neck.
Her neck is slender yet strong, like that of an unbroken racehorse.
She explained to the others.
It displays both elegance and resilience, a rare combination.
The elder woman reached out tentatively, her fingers grazing the column of Lyra's throat where it met with the base of her head. Lyra felt a shiver course down her spine as Safina's touch lingered just a moment longer than strictly necessary, a silent acknowledgement of their shared understanding in this ritual. The elder woman then shifted her attention to the curve of Lyra's shoulders.
Her upper back is strong yet supple, unmarred by tension or discomfort.
Safina observed aloud, almost as if addressing an audience rather than examining Lyra personally.
It speaks well of both her upbringing and her natural resilience.
Lyra could feel the weight of scrutiny pressing down on her, urging her to display more pride in her physical form. She straightened her back subconsciously, the motion subtle yet deliberate. At last, Safina's gaze settled upon Lyra's chest, the critical eye lingering far longer than it had any previous part of her body. The elder woman made no effort to hide her disappointment.
Her bust is smaller than expected,
she said bluntly, as though this were a flaw that needed correcting.
But there is some redeeming quality in its firmness and the perky shape.
Lyra felt herself bristle at the criticism. The other women spoke up in a chorus, their voices soft yet united.
Yes, true,
they murmured, eyes flickering briefly to Lyra's chest before looking away, trying to hide the embarrassment that colored their cheeks. Her breasts are well-shaped and her nipples small but firm.
A fine balance
for a woman who is both mother and warrior. Safina seemed to consider this, her gaze once more sweeping over Lyra in appraisal.
There is a certain charm to them,
she admitted after what felt like an eternity of silence.
Perhaps the strength of her spirit will compensate for any perceived weakness in form.
The elder woman turned away from Lyra as though discarding something inconsequential. Safina continued her examination as the other women whispered their approval amongst themselves.
Her waist is narrow, the perfect curve to frame her form.
Safina commented appreciatively, eyes tracing along the lines of Lyra's silhouette.
And her stomach is flat, proof of a disciplined life and strong core.
Lyra felt herself tense up at the attention focused on such an intimate part of her body, yet found pride swelling in her chest at the approval expressed through Safina's words. The elder woman then shifted her gaze downward, trailing her eyes over Lyra's hips.
Her hips are wide,
she observed, no longer attempting to hide her frankness.
A sign of fertility and potential for nurturing life, a trait that will serve her well as a future mother.
As their gazes moved further south, the room seemed to grow warmer, the air thick with tension. Lyra felt herself blushing anew. There was nothing subtle about this part of the examination. Safina's eyes then landed on one of Lyra's most intimate features, the soft tuft of red curls nestled at the center of her being. The elder woman made no attempt to conceal her frankness, and the room seemed to hold its breath as she spoke.
Her intimate hair is a striking shade of red, unlike that of any other woman in our family,
Safina observed, her voice steady yet filled with an unspoken judgment. Lyra felt a heat spread across her cheeks as she stood there, the weight of countless generations' expectations placed upon her form. She had always been proud of this distinguishing feature, one passed down through the Embersong line. But now it felt like a mere footnote in the grand assessment of her worthiness. The elder woman's gaze lingered on that private space for what seemed an eternity, and Lyra could feel herself shrinking under the scrutiny. But as Safina finally turned away, she spoke once more, her voice softening ever so slightly.
It is true that many might find it unorthodox, but there lies both strength and uniqueness in its fiery shade.
The other women nodded in agreement, their eyes flickering towards Lyra before darting away again, as though acknowledging the raw power contained within that small patch of red curls.
Indeed,
Added one of the elder women present, her voice carrying a subtle hint of intrigue and curiosity.
to shave it into such a precise triangle shape is both audacious and intimate, a bold statement of self-expression and control over one's body.
Lyra felt herself standing slightly taller at these words, an invisible veil lifting from around her as the women began to see beyond the judged feature to the woman who bore it. There was no judgment in their voices now, only a fascination with Lyra's choices, a curiosity that bordered on admiration.
It requires not just courage,
Safina mused aloud.
but also a certain confidence. Confidence in one's identity and comfort within one's own skin.
Her eyes seemed to pierce through the air once more, as if daring every woman present to acknowledge their own grooming choices and stand with Lyra in her uniqueness.
And yet,
Safina continued, eliciting a collective murmur from the room that was both approving and contemplative.
it is not just about confidence. It speaks of an openness, a readiness to embrace all aspects of life's journey.
The women present nodded slowly, their faces reflecting a newfound understanding and respect for Lyra's choice. Safina's gaze finally settled on Lyra once more, lingering on the triangle of fiery red curls above her pubic bone before moving further downward. As Safina's eyes traveled down from the fiery crown of Lyra's triangle to the space between her thighs, a soft parting in the dense foliage of her groomed hair revealed a gap that seemed to invite light and attention alike. This unadorned space was a stark contrast to the carefully curated landscape above, yet it served as an essential framing for the beauty that lay within. The room grew still once more, each woman's gaze drawn inexorably towards this private crevice where shadows played in the interplay of light. The subtle curvature of Lyra's folds came into view, each one a testament to her body's natural form, enhanced by her deliberate choices. The softness of her skin caught the ambient glow within the room, imbuing it with a sheen that highlighted this most intimate area. The glimmering effect was as if the surface of still water under the touch of a gentle breeze. It rippled softly over her folds, each curve catching and refracting light into tiny, shimmering reflections that danced across the space. The light played over the smoothness of Lyra's skin, revealing the textures hidden within the crevices and the valleys between the hills of her flesh. Safina let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, her eyes never leaving the breathtaking vision before her. She began with an appreciative tilt of her head.
These are indeed the gates through which life's journey will unfold for you, Lyra Embersong.
Safina's gaze lingered on this display, not with a sense of clinical examination, but rather as an acknowledgement of the raw beauty that lay before them all. It was an unspoken testament to Lyra's choice, a bold expression of self-affirmation and a celebration of the female form in all its varied expressions.
Turn.
Safina instructed, and Lyra complied, rotating slowly to allow examination of her back, her shoulders, the curve of her spine leading to her hips.
Good muscular definition without bulkiness. A fire mage's body. Controlled power rather than brute force.
As Safina's approving gaze moved from down her back, her eyes were drawn to another striking feature of Lyra's anatomy. The room fell silent once more as Lyra turned slightly, giving everyone a full view of her assets that had not yet been scrutinized. Lyra's round, plump butt was a masterpiece in itself, a perfect symphony of form and function. Each curve was like a ripe fruit, ready to be admired and explored. The muscles were firm but inviting, with just the right amount of give to suggest a softness beneath. The elder woman's eyes then moved down further to Lyra's thighs, which were equally impressive. They were strong yet supple, their roundness accentuated by the way they connected to her firm buttocks. Safina couldn't help but notice how Lyra's legs seemed to be crafted from alabaster. They were both smooth and powerful, leading to the conclusion that Lyra was as capable in action as she was beautiful in stillness. The soft lighting within the room played across the curves of Lyra's body with a lover's caress. It glistened off her skin like morning dew on petals, highlighting each curve and contour in breathtaking detail. The effect was hypnotic, causing one to lose themselves in the beauty of it all. Safina took a step back, surveying Lyra from head to toe before addressing the assemblywomen once more.
What we have here is not just an individual poised on the threshold of change. We have a testament to femininity in its purest form, a symbol that each of us carries within ourselves.
With a knowing smile, Safina's gaze returned to Lyra's form, her eyes sparkling with a mix of admiration and insight.
Lyra Embersong,
she began, her voice rich with the gravitas of wisdom.
You stand before us not just as a testament to beauty or strength, but also as a vessel ready to be filled by Alek, the perfect complement to complete your journey.
Her words resonated through the room, each one carefully chosen to convey the depth of what she was suggesting.
Your form, both strong and receptive, is likened to fertile ground, waiting for the seed to take root and grow. It's a natural harmony, a union not just of bodies but of spirits, seeking to intertwine.
Finally, after what seemed an eternity under their evaluating gaze, Safina completed her circuit to stand before Lyra once more.
The Brightforge witnesses find this union physically compatible,
she announced formally.
The vessel is worthy to carry the joined flame of our houses.
Again that word, vessel. A container, a receptacle, a passive holder for something deemed more valuable than the vessel itself. Lyra's anger burned deeper, though her expression revealed nothing beyond appropriate solemnity for the ritual moment.
The Embersong witness acknowledges the finding.
Zara responded with equal formality, though Lyra detected the subtle undercurrent of suppressed rage in her friend's voice.
The joining may proceed as tradition demands.
Safina nodded once, then gestured toward the western windows where the sun now hovered just above the horizon.
Sunset approaches. It is time for the flame vestment.
This, at least, was a ritual element where Lyra could reclaim some agency. The flame vestment, magical attire conjured through personal fire manipulation, represented the mage's individuality, even as they prepared to join with another. Unlike standardized ceremonial garments, these flame constructs revealed the creator's magical signature, aesthetic preferences, and technical skill. As the Brightforge women withdrew to appropriate observational distance, Lyra centered herself for the working. This particular magic had always come naturally to her. Fire manipulation shaped into stable illusion, substance created from ephemeral flame. More importantly, the complexity of her intended design would provide perfect cover for introducing the spirit dust during the ceremony itself. She began with a core framework of controlled fire, drawing energy from the room's ambient magic rather than depleting her personal reserves. The basic structure took shape around her, a skirt-like foundation that floated just above her skin without touching it, suspended by magical current rather than physical support. From this foundation, she extended delicate filaments of flame upward, creating an intricate bodice of interwoven fire strands that covered her torso while revealing glimpses of skin beneath the flame pattern. The construction required precise control, maintaining uniform heat throughout to prevent both discomfort and instability. Next came the most challenging element, the phoenix motif that would transform a mere flame dress into a statement of personal magical identity. Starting at her shoulders, Lyra crafted wings of living fire that extended outward before curving down to merge with the skirt, creating the impression of a majestic bird with outstretched wings embracing its wearer. The head formed at her right shoulder, a proud avian profile crafted from subtly different flame colors. Amber for the crest, deep crimson for the beak, gold for the intelligent eye that seemed to blink and shift as the flames moved. The tail extended from the opposite side, long feathers of graduated fire trailing behind her in a display that would flow like actual plumage when she walked. Most impressive, and requiring the most control, was the animation she infused throughout the construct. The phoenix wasn't merely a static design, but a living pattern, the wings occasionally flexing, the head turning slightly, the tail feathers rustling in invisible currents. These movements remained subtle enough to maintain ceremonial dignity while demonstrating magical mastery beyond ordinary flame manipulation. The completed flame vestment surrounded Lyra in living fire that clothed without burning, protected without constraining. Unlike traditional fabric garments, this magical attire existed as an extension of her will, responsive to her intentions and expressive of her innermost self.
Impressive craftsmanship.
Safina acknowledged, genuine respect briefly overcoming her political calculation.
The Embersong talent for detail shows clearly in your work.
The compliment, honestly given despite their adversarial relationship, reminded Lyra of what she had always found missing in her guild's evaluation of her talents. Alek, her father, the elders, all valued power over precision, raw force over controlled expression. Yet here was Safina Brightforge, recognizing exactly what made Lyra's magic remarkable. Not its destructive potential, but its intricate beauty. This brief moment of connection across family lines vanished as Safina continued with ritual formality.
The sun touches the horizon. It is time to proceed to the ceremonial hall. Lord Brightforge awaits his bride.
Those words, his bride, sent the necklace pulsing with triumphant heat against Lyra's throat. The possessive phrasing aligned perfectly with the enchantment's purpose, reinforcing Alek's claim upon her through both social ritual and magical binding. As attendants rushed forward to make final adjustments to her appearance before the procession to the ceremonial hall, Lyra found her thoughts returning to that persistent sense of something missing in her life. A void she had recognized even before Alek's manipulation had complicated everything. For years, she had assumed what she lacked was simply recognition, acknowledgement of her precise magical control as valuable rather than merely decorative. The respect shown for her flame vestment suggested this wasn't entirely misplaced. Proper appreciation might indeed have filled part of that emptiness. But the connection she had experienced with Cassius in the Ember Sanctuary had revealed something deeper missing. Genuine partnership based on mutual understanding rather than political advantage. Their magical resonance had shown her possibilities beyond guild separation, beyond traditional constraints, beyond the rigid categorizations that had defined her existence. That glimpse of possibility now stood in stark contrast to the ceremony awaiting her. A ritual designed to bind her to someone who viewed her as a tool for accessing ancestral power, rather than a partner in magical exploration. The gap between what could be and what was about to transpire couldn't have been more painfully clear. The necklace pulsed again, sensing her emotional turmoil and attempting to redirect it toward artificial pleasure. Lyra reinforced her mental shield, protecting her thoughts from manipulation while acknowledging the physical sensations without surrendering to them.
It's time,
Zara said quietly, appearing at her side as the final preparations concluded. She moved close, ostensibly adjusting the flame patterns near Lyra's shoulder, using the moment to slip 2 tiny crystals into Lyra's palm, the spirit dust they would need for their plan.
Remember,
She whispered.
wait until you're at the ceremonial fire brazier.
Lyra closed her fingers carefully around the crystals, the small size making them easy to conceal within her hand. Her eyes conveyed gratitude beyond words as she straightened her posture. The attendants opened the chamber doors. Beyond lay the corridor leading to the grand ceremonial hall, where Alek and the assembled guild hierarchy awaited, where their plan would either succeed in disrupting his working or fail catastrophically, where her future would be determined one way or another. The phoenix wings of her flame vestment flexed slightly, responding to her resolve as she stepped forward. At her throat, the necklace pulsed with steady heat, its enchantment prepared to channel her ancestral connections into whatever working Alek had designed. And somewhere in the northeastern reaches of Pyreholm, Cassius waited in the Ember Sanctuary, monitoring through their established connection, ready to activate his portion of the countermeasure when the moment arrived. Sunset had come. The engagement ceremony was about to begin. Whatever happened next would either bind Lyra to Alek's control or set her on a path toward a freedom she had only recently begun to imagine possible. With the phoenix flames moving around her like a living second skin, she stepped into the corridor, each pace bringing her closer to confrontation, and to the possibility of something beyond the emptiness that had defined her life for too long. The grand ceremonial hall blazed with light. Hundreds of enchanted flames suspended in elaborate patterns across its vaulted ceiling, casting dancing shadows over the assembled guild elite. Circular in design with tiered seating ascending from a central flame basin, the space had witnessed centuries of fire guild rituals, each layer of stone absorbing and preserving magical resonance from generations past. Lyra paused at the entrance, the twin crystals of spirit dust concealed in her palm as she surveyed what awaited. 5 ceremonial positions had been marked around the central basin, creating a perfect pentagram. A ritual configuration Alek had clearly designed to maximize whatever working he intended to perform with the incomplete Crown of Cinders. Guild hierarchy filled the tiered seating. Elders in formal attire, prominent mages representing major houses, diplomatic guests from allied territories. Her father occupied the High Councilor's position, his expression appropriately solemn for the occasion, though his eyes tracked her with unusual intensity, suggesting Zara's subtle hints about potential irregularities had not gone unnoticed. And at the central basin stood Alek. His flame vestment complemented her own without mimicking it, a masterwork of controlled fire shaped into formal attire that emphasized masculine strength while displaying considerable technical skill. Where her phoenix design showcased delicate precision, his flame garment featured a dragon motif, powerful wings extending from his shoulders, scaled patterns tracing his torso, a serpentine tail trailing behind him as he moved. The contrast was deliberate, of course. Phoenix and dragon, traditional symbolism representing the feminine and masculine aspects of fire magic, the elegant precision paired with raw power, beauty joined with strength. A visual representation of what the guild considered ideal magical partnership. The necklace at Lyra's throat pulsed with anticipatory warmth as she began her ceremonial approach, following the traditional path that would bring her to Alek's side before the flame basin. Her phoenix flame garment moved with her, wings flexing, tail feathers shifting in ethereal currents, the animated construct drawing appreciative murmurs from the assembled witnesses. As she walked, Lyra remained acutely aware of the spirit dust concealed in her palm. two tiny crystals representing elements Alek's incomplete crown lacked. With his fire, earth, and water components already secured, he intended to use her ancestral connections to compensate for missing air and spirit elements. Their plan hinged on introducing those missing elements in their pure form, creating proper balance rather than the corrupted dominance he sought. She reached Alek's side, his golden eyes reflecting the ceremonial flames as he extended his hand in formal greeting. The ritual required their first physical contact to occur before the assembled witnesses, symbolizing the voluntary nature of their union.
You look magnificent,
He said loudly enough for those nearest to hear, his tone conveying admiration edged with possession.
The phoenix suits you perfectly.
As the dragon suits you,
Lyra replied with practiced warmth, maintaining her public performance while keeping the spirit dust carefully concealed within her slightly curled fingers.
strength and beauty joined in balance.
His smile deepened at her response, clearly interpreting her ceremonial phrasing as genuine sentiment. The necklace pulsed against her throat, its enchantment attempting to align her emotions with her spoken words, sending waves of artificial warmth through her body that she acknowledged without surrendering to. The ceremony master moved to his position beside the flame basin, raising his hands for silence as the assembled witnesses settled into attentive stillness.
We gather at sunset.
He intoned, his magically amplified voice reaching every corner of the vast hall.
When day yields to night. When light surrenders to darkness. When individual flames seek union to sustain their brilliance against encroaching shadow.
Traditional opening. Poetic language masking the guild's historical obsession with maintaining fire magic's dominance over other elements, particularly spirit's association with darkness. Lyra had never fully appreciated the political propaganda embedded in ceremonial phrases until her experiences with Cassius had revealed alternative perspectives.
Lord Alek Brightforge of the Inferno Circle and Magister Lyra Embersong of the High Council lineage come before us to declare intention of magical and matrimonial union.
The ceremony master continued.
Their flames, joined this day in formal engagement, will illuminate the future path of our guild with combined brilliance.
The ritual proceeded with ancient precision. Invocations spoken, responses given, formal acknowledgement of family lineages, and magical achievements recited for official record. Throughout these preliminary stages, Lyra maintained her ceremonial composure while remaining hyper-aware of the spirit dust in her palm, waiting for the critical moment when the actual magical working would begin. That moment approached as the ceremony master gestured toward the central flame basin, an elaborately carved receptacle of volcanic stone positioned over one of Pyreholm's natural heat vents, creating a permanent connection to the molten core beneath the city.
We come now to the first joining.
He announced.
The union of individual flames into shared purpose. The melding of separate signatures into harmonious resonance. Lord Brightforge and Magister Embersong will now demonstrate the compatibility of their magical essences through combined working.
This was it. The first opportunity Alek would have to attempt activating whatever function the incomplete crown served in his larger scheme. The first joining traditionally involved creating a shared flame that would burn throughout the engagement period, symbolizing the couple's compatible magics seeking full unification in eventual marriage. Lyra moved alongside Alek toward the basin, the phoenix and dragon of their flame garments appearing to acknowledge each other with subtle animated movements that drew appreciative murmurs from the witnesses. Such detailed control while maintaining the larger constructs demonstrated impressive magical discipline from both participants.
Together?
Alek said, extending his hand toward hers, the traditional invitation to begin the working. Lyra placed her hand in his, feeling his magic surge to meet hers with immediate intensity. Unlike their shared working during the midnight procession, where his attempts to access her ancestral connections had been relatively subtle, this direct contact carried focused purpose, a concentrated magical probe seeking specific pathways within her magical signature. The necklace flared with sudden heat, its enchantment activating fully as Alek channeled power through it. Without the moon opal's intervention, the jewelry's connection to her ancestral pathways stood unobstructed, creating a direct channel between Alek's magic and the Embersong lineage's accumulated power. Yet beneath that connection, nearly imperceptible to anyone not specifically monitoring it, Lyra felt another presence. Cassius, reaching through the magical link they had established in the Ember Sanctuary, his spirit magic creating a subtle counterbalance to the necklace's channeling function. Not blocking it entirely, which would immediately alert Alek to interference, but establishing an alternative pathway that could be expanded at the critical moment.
We offer our individual flames to create shared illumination,
Alek proclaimed, following the traditional phrasing while his magic worked with far less traditional purpose.
separate strengths unified in common purpose.
Distinct yet harmonious, independent yet aligned.
Lyra responded, the ceremonial words serving as cover for her own magical preparations. She positioned her hand, the one concealing the spirit dust, directly above the empty basin, ready for the moment when their combined magic would ignite the ritual flame. Together, they released carefully controlled streams of fire magic into the basin. Alek's a powerful golden surge, Lyra's a precise crimson flow that intertwined with his like dancers moving in choreographed harmony. The visual display drew appropriate appreciation from the witnesses, who saw only the beauty of compatible magical signatures, rather than the battling purposes beneath. As their magic ignited the ceremonial flame, Alek channeled a sudden surge of power through their joined hands, directing it through the necklace toward Lyra's ancestral connections. The move was masterfully executed, a magical sleight of hand disguised within the larger working, invisible to anyone not specifically involved in or watching for it. This was the moment. With precise timing honed through years of controlled fire manipulation, Lyra released the spirit dust directly into the ceremonial flame, while crafting an elaborate phoenix illusion around the basin that drew all eyes upward, away from the tiny crystals dissolving into the magical current. The effect was immediate and dramatic, though visible only to those directly involved in the working. Alek's channeled magic, reaching for her ancestral connections through the necklace, encountered unexpected resistance as the spirit dust activated. Rather than accessing the Embersong ancestral power as he intended, his working connected instead with the pure elemental essences of spirit and air now introduced into the magical current. Lyra felt the exact moment when Cassius's power surged through their established connection, activating the spirit crystal from a distance, infusing it with authentic spirit magic that couldn't be mimicked or controlled through Alek's incomplete crown. Simultaneously, something shifted in the air currents around the basin, a subtle disturbance that suggested Zara had successfully introduced her hidden air affinity to activate the second crystal. Confusion flickered across Alek's features, momentary but unmistakable to Lyra's close observation. His working had encountered something unexpected, elements responding in ways his careful calculations hadn't anticipated. The incomplete Crown of Cinders, designed to dominate fire, earth, and water while compensating for missing elements through Lyra's ancestral connections, suddenly faced actual spirit and air energies that demanded proper integration rather than subjugation. For an instant, magical potential hung in perfect suspension. Fire, earth, and water from Alek's incomplete crown, spirit from Cassius's distant working, air from Zara's hidden affinity, all connected through the ceremonial flame in a pentagonal balance that momentarily recreated what the Crown of Cinders had originally been designed to achieve. Not dominance of one element over others, but harmonious integration of all five into something greater than their separate expressions. Alek withdrew his channeling attempt abruptly, though his external composure never faltered. To witnesses, the ceremonial flame simply stabilized into a beautiful blend of their magical signatures, gold and crimson intertwining in elaborate patterns that fulfilled traditional expectations perfectly. Only those directly involved in the magical struggle beneath would recognize how thoroughly his working had been disrupted.
The first joining is accomplished.
The ceremony master announced with appropriate solemnity.
The unified flame will burn until their union is fully realized through marriage.
Lyra maintained her ceremonial smile while internally monitoring the magical aftermath. The spirit dust had been completely consumed, its elemental essence integrated into the working in ways that would make identifying external interference nearly impossible without revealing Alek's own unauthorized manipulations. Cassius's distant connection remained present, but subdued, a background awareness rather than active intervention now that the immediate crisis had passed. The ceremony continued to its next phase. Ritual promises exchanged, formal acknowledgments from both families, traditional blessings offered by guild elders. Throughout these proceedings, Lyra noted Alek's careful recalibration, his golden eyes occasionally lingering on the ceremonial flame with calculated assessment, his magic subtly testing the unexpected variables that had disrupted his working. The second joining came midway through the ceremony. Another opportunity for combined magical demonstration, this one focused on creating complementary fire constructs that would interact harmoniously, symbolizing how their individual talents would enhance rather than compete with each other in marriage. Alek moved with confident precision, crafting an impressive dragon construct that circled the ceremonial space with lifelike fluidity. Scales gleaming gold and copper, eyes burning with inner fire, wings creating gusts of heated air that witnesses could physically feel as it passed overhead. The display showcased exceptional power control, maintaining such a large animated construct while simultaneously preparing for another attempt at his true working. Lyra responded with her signature phoenix, smaller than Alek's dragon, but executed with such intricate detail that many witnesses leaned forward in their seats, straining to appreciate the delicate flame feathers, the subtly shifting colors, the impossibly precise movements that mimicked actual avian grace. The contrast between his power and her precision created exactly the complementary impression tradition demanded. As the constructs circled each other in elaborate patterns, Alek initiated his second attempt at accessing her ancestral connections. More careful this time, his magical probe more subtle as it navigated through the necklace's established channels, seeking alternate pathways around whatever interference had disrupted his first attempt. But the elemental balance established during the first joining remained present in the ceremonial flame, creating a template that magical energies naturally sought to follow. When Alek's channeling reached for Lyra's ancestral connections, it again encountered the spirit and air essences integrated into the working, elements seeking proper pentagonal balance rather than the corrupted dominance his incomplete crown required. Frustration flashed briefly in his golden eyes as he once again withdrew his channeling attempt, though his dragon construct never faltered in its impressive aerial display. To witnesses, the second joining appeared flawlessly executed as the dragon and phoenix performed an elaborate dance around the ceremonial flame, circling, intertwining, separating and rejoining in patterns traditionally interpreted as representations of married life's natural rhythms.
The second joining demonstrates harmonious interaction,
The ceremony master proclaimed.
different natures enhancing rather than diminishing each other through proper union.
Throughout the remaining ritual elements, Lyra maintained her ceremonial performance with perfect composure, speaking appropriate responses, executing traditional magical demonstrations, portraying the appropriately honored bride-to-be that tradition demanded. Yet beneath this exterior compliance, she remained vigilantly aware of Alek's growing calculation as he analyzed what had disrupted his working. The final joining represented his last opportunity to activate whatever function the incomplete crown served before the formal ceremony concluded. This culminating magical demonstration traditionally involved both participants contributing to a shared working that would showcase their combined potential, a preview of what their magical union could ultimately achieve. Alek approached this final attempt with redoubled focus, his magical signature intensifying as he prepared a more forceful approach. The necklace at Lyra's throat grew uncomfortably hot, its enchantment strengthening in response to his increased determination.
Our final demonstration will honor both tradition and innovation,
He announced to the assembled witnesses.
a working that draws from ancient techniques while creating something uniquely ours.
The phrasing was carefully chosen to prepare witnesses for something beyond standard ceremonial displays, providing cover for whatever unusual magical effects might emerge from his attempted crown activation. Tradition valued innovation within proper boundaries. Witnesses would interpret unusual manifestations as impressive creativity rather than forbidden techniques.
Together we craft a vision of what our union will bring to the guild.
Lyra responded, maintaining her role in the ceremonial dialogue while preparing for this final confrontation. They extended their hands simultaneously toward the central flame, not quite touching each other, but creating overlapping magical fields that connected their separate workings into unified purpose. The flame responded immediately, surging upward with increased intensity as their combined power fed its magical current. Alek channeled with remarkable precision, his magical signature showing none of the frustration she knew he must be feeling after 2 failed attempts. The incomplete crown's influence became evident in how the ceremonial flame responded, subtle patterns emerging within the fire that corresponded to specific elemental orientations. Gold for fire, deep brown for earth, blue-green for water, arranged in a triangular configuration that awaited completion. With masterful control, he directed a concentrated surge of power through the necklace, attempting to access her ancestral connections with enough force to overcome whatever interference had disrupted his previous attempts. The jewelry burned against Lyra's throat, its enchantment working at full capacity to channel her family's accumulated magical heritage into his corrupted crown working. Through her connection with Cassius, Lyra felt the spirit seer's immediate response, not blocking Alek's channel directly, which would reveal their interference, but offering her ancestral spirits an alternative pathway. Where Alek's working attempted to compel their participation, Cassius's approach invited voluntary contribution, creating a more natural resonance that ghostly predecessors would instinctively prefer. Simultaneously, she sensed Zara's subtle contribution from her position near the High Councilor, a carefully controlled release of air affinity that most fire mages would attribute to natural drafts within the ceremonial space. This breeze carried purpose beyond physical movement, introducing genuine air element into the magical current in ways that completed, rather than corrupted, the crown's original pentagonal design. For the 3rd time, Alek's attempted working encountered balanced resistance rather than passive submission. The ceremonial flame continued responding beautifully to their combined magic, creating spectacular visual displays that drew appropriate appreciation from the witnesses. But beneath these surface effects, his specific channeling found itself repeatedly redirected toward proper elemental balance rather than corrupted dominance. Frustration flashed more visibly across his features this time, a momentary crack in his composed facade that she doubted many witnesses would notice, focused as they were on the impressive flame configurations above the basin. But Lyra saw it clearly, recognizing the calculation that immediately followed as he abandoned this 3rd attempt and smoothly transitioned to a standard ceremonial conclusion.
The final joining is completed.
The ceremony master announced as their combined workings stabilized into an appropriately impressive display.
The engagement is formally recognized by guild and family, binding these mages in ceremonial commitment that will culminate in matrimonial union.
The formal language continued, traditional blessings offered, family acknowledgements exchanged, official documentation presented for verification. Throughout these concluding elements, Lyra maintained her ceremonial performance with perfect precision, while mentally categorizing what she had observed during Alek's 3 attempted workings. He had been prepared for resistance after the midnight procession's disruption, but not for the specific form that resistance had taken. His frustration suggested the unexpected introduction of actual spirit and air elements had created complications beyond mere interference. Perhaps his incomplete crown functioned through domination rather than integration, requiring subjugated rather than balanced elements to achieve whatever purpose he intended. As the ceremony concluded and formal congratulations began, Alek's arms slipped around her waist, his touch both ceremonially appropriate and subtly possessive. The necklace pulsed warmly against her throat, responding to his proximity while continuing its attempts to influence her emotions toward him.
"You were magnificent,"
he murmured, his voice pitched for her ears alone as guild officials approached to offer congratulations.
"though something continues to interfere with our magical resonance. Most curious."
Perhaps our signatures require more intimate alignment before achieving their full potential,
Lyra suggested, allowing appropriate bridal shyness to color her tone while offering an explanation that would appeal to both his ego and his strategic thinking. The calculated suggestion worked perfectly. Interest flared in his golden eyes, both personal and magical, as he considered the implications.
"A sophisticated observation,"
he acknowledged, fingers tightening slightly at her waist.
"Traditional wisdom does hold that physical union enhances magical compatibility."
The necklace warmed against her skin, apparently approving this direction of conversation. Lyra allowed herself to blush. Not a difficult performance given the intimate subject matter, though her reasons differed entirely from what Alek would assume.
My mother mentioned the tradition,
she continued, voice appropriately hesitant.
Though of course formal propriety requires waiting until after marriage.
Formal propriety concerns itself with public appearances, not private realities,
Alek replied, his tone suggesting reasonable perspective rather than improper intention.
Many engaged couples discover enhanced magical resonance through accelerated intimacy before public ceremony.
Exactly the response she had anticipated. By suggesting physical intimacy as solution to his magical difficulties, she had redirected his immediate suspicions while gaining valuable time. He would now focus on seduction rather than investigation, believing their marriage bed would provide the missing element his working required rather than suspecting deliberate sabotage.
Perhaps,
she whispered, lowering her eyes in what would appear as maidenly modesty.
After tonight's festivities conclude.
The suggestion hung between them, seemingly incomplete from bashfulness, but clear enough in implication. The necklace pulsed with enthusiastic warmth, interpreting her feigned interest as genuine and attempting to amplify it through physical sensation. Lyra allowed this artificial response to show in her expression, knowing it would convince Alek of his enchantment's continued effectiveness. His smile carried satisfaction, laced with anticipation, as he turned to acknowledge approaching guild elders offering formal congratulations. The calculated pleasure in his expression confirmed her strategy's success. He believed his eventual goal merely delayed, rather than fundamentally prevented, his patience willing to accommodate temporary setback in service to larger ambition. The ceremonial flame continued burning between them, its balanced pattern invisible to most observers, but representing significant victory nonetheless. Alek's 3 attempted workings had failed to activate whatever function the incomplete Crown of Cinders served in his larger plans. The corrupted dominance he sought had been temporarily thwarted through proper elemental balance. Across the ceremonial space, Lyra briefly caught Zara's gaze, her friend's expression appropriately celebratory for a supporting witness, while her eyes conveyed deeper understanding of what had transpired beneath the ritual's surface. Near her stood Lyra's father, his assessment more penetrating than usual as he observed his daughter and future son-in-law, suggesting Zara had indeed directed his attention to specific moments during Alek's attempted workings. And somewhere beyond the hall's crowded interior, connected through magical resonance rather than physical proximity, Cassius maintained his supportive presence. Distant, yet perceptible to Lyra's heightened awareness, a reminder that alternatives existed beyond the corrupted dominance Alek represented, beyond the rigid separation guild tradition enforced, beyond the future currently being celebrated by the assembled witnesses. The engagement ceremony had concluded. The corrupted crown working had failed, but significant challenges remained. The necklace still bound her to Alek's influence. His plans merely delayed rather than defeated. The eventual marriage still approaching with ceremonial inevitability, despite tonight's private victory. As Alek led her through the receiving line of guild officials offering congratulations, his hand possessively at the small of her back, Lyra maintained her perfect public performance. The appropriate smile, the gracious responses, the subtle physical cues of a bride-to-be pleased with her ceremonial success. The phoenix flame garment continued its delicate movements around her, responding to her magical control with lifelike precision that drew continued admiration from observers. Beneath this flawless exterior, her mind worked with similar precision, cataloging what they had learned through tonight's confrontation, identifying opportunities and vulnerabilities for the challenges still ahead. The necklace required removal. Alek's true purposes needed exposure. The incomplete Crown of Cinders demanded further investigation. And somewhere within these strategic assessments, less clearly defined but equally persistent, remained awareness of possibilities glimpsed through her connection with Cassius. Alternatives to dominance and separation. Partnership based on resonance rather than control. Balance achieved through complementary difference rather than enforced similarity. For tonight, they had prevented Alek from achieving his immediate goal. For tonight, that would have to be enough. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own opportunities, its own decisions regarding what could be preserved and what must be sacrificed in pursuit of larger freedom. The phoenix wings of her flame garment flexed slightly, responding to this determination as she moved alongside Alek through the ceremonial hall's main exit, acknowledging final congratulations from assembled witnesses. Tonight had been victory narrowly achieved. Tomorrow remained unwritten, filled with both danger and possibility, with paths leading toward either continued constraint or unprecedented liberation. The necklace pulsed against her throat, a constant reminder of battles not yet won despite tonight's success. Yet alongside its artificial warmth, Lyra felt something else. The cooling awareness of connection maintained across distance, the subtle presence of alternatives beyond what tradition prescribed, the growing certainty that dominance, however skillfully imposed, could never create the resonance she had briefly experienced through genuine partnership. That awareness, more than any strategic planning or magical countermeasure, would sustain her through whatever confrontations still awaited. A fire kindled from authentic connection rather than compelled compliance, burning steadily beneath the perfect performance she maintained as Alek led her from the ceremonial hall into a future still contested, still undetermined, still hers to shape despite the constraints that currently bound her. As they reached the antechamber where family members awaited to offer private congratulations, Alek leaned close, his lips near her ear in what would appear to observers as an affectionate gesture.
I fear I must leave you for the night, my dear,
he murmured, regret coloring his tone though his eyes remained calculatingly sharp.
Even though I wish to continue our earlier talk, I have matters most urgent to attend.
Disappointment flickered across Lyra's features, perfectly calibrated to suggest a bride reluctant to part from her betrothed rather than relief at postponed intimate confrontation.
Of course,
she replied, allowing appropriate wistfulness to soften her voice.
Your responsibilities to the guild take precedence, especially during festival season.
His hand tightened briefly at her waist, possession disguised as affection.
Tomorrow, perhaps.
He suggested, the promise carrying layers of meaning beyond the simple words.
After the festival concludes.
Tomorrow.
She agreed, lowering her eyes in what he would interpret as anticipatory modesty. With formal farewells exchanged, Alek departed to attend whatever urgent matters required his attention. Likely reassessment of his thwarted working, Lyra suspected, though the specific nature of his absence mattered less than the reprieve it provided. Zara appeared at her side almost immediately, playing the role of supportive friend escorting the bride-to-be to her chambers after the exhausting ceremony.
It worked,
Zara whispered once they were beyond curious ears, her voice barely audible despite the privacy charm she cast around them.
His frustration was visible from where I stood.
3 attempts, 3 failures.
Lyra confirmed, maintaining her ceremonial smile despite their serious discussion.
The elemental balance prevented whatever dominance-based working the incomplete crown requires.
Your father noticed something unusual during the final joining,
Zara added.
He specifically asked me afterward if I had observed any unconventional channeling from Lord Brightforge.
That development warranted further discussion, but not in public corridors where even privacy charms could fail. They continued in ceremonial silence until reaching Lyra's tower, where Zara helped her through the traditional post-ceremony rituals, recording the event in family chronicles, preserving a flame sample from the ceremonial basin, completing various symbolic tasks required by guild tradition.
Will you be all right alone?
Zara asked when these duties concluded, genuine concern in her expression as she prepared to depart.
The necklace seems increasingly active.
Lyra touched the jewelry at her throat, feeling its persistent warmth pulsing against her skin. Without the moon, Opal's interference, and after the magical exertion of countering Alek's working, the enchantment had intensified noticeably, sending frequent waves of inappropriate heat through her body that required constant management.
I'll manage,
she assured her friend, summoning confidence she didn't entirely feel.
Get some rest. Tomorrow brings new challenges.
After Zara's departure, Lyra secured her chamber door with both physical lock and magical wards stronger than her usual protections. Only then did she release her flame vestment, the phoenix construct dissolving into harmless embers that dissipated before reaching the floor, leaving her nude in the privacy of her tower room. The ceremonial fire bath awaited, traditional purification after formal engagement, symbolizing cleansing before new beginnings. She approached the copper tub with its enchanted flames that would warm without burning, purify without consuming. The ritual demanded complete immersion, allowing magical fire to cleanse both physical form and inner essence. As she lowered herself into the fire bath, the necklace reacted violently, flaring with intense heat that had nothing to do with the ceremonial flames surrounding her. Waves of inappropriate sensation cascaded through her body, the enchantment seemingly enraged by the purification ritual's implicit cleansing of outside influences. Lyra gasped, struggling to maintain her focus as the necklace's assault intensified beyond anything she had previously experienced. The spirit shield around her thoughts held, but her physical form responded with shocking vulnerability to the enchantment's attack. Every nerve ending suddenly hypersensitized to sensations the jewelry deliberately amplified. She forced herself to complete the fire bath despite this onslaught, moving through the traditional motions with mechanical precision while internally battling the necklace's overwhelming influence. By the time she emerged from the ceremonial flames, her body trembled with exhaustion from the constant effort of resistance. The enchantment should have diminished after the ceremony's completion, its immediate purpose fulfilled. Instead, it seemed to have intensified, as if Alek had somehow strengthened its influence remotely in response to his thwarted working. Each pulse sent increasingly powerful waves of artificial desire coursing through her, demanding surrender to sensations her mind recognized as false, even as her body responded to their physical reality. Lyra staggered to her bed, unable to summon the energy to dress after the ceremonial bath. The necklace's assault continued unabated, each wave more intense than the last, gradually overwhelming her ability to compartmentalize its effects. Her vision blurred. Her breathing became shallow and rapid, her consciousness beginning to fragment under the relentless pressure. This is different, she realized through the haze of artificially induced sensation. Not simply the enchantment's usual influence, but something more directed, more intentional, almost like punishment for the knight's successful resistance. Had Alek somehow sensed their interference? Was this deliberate retaliation? With trembling fingers, she reached for the small communication crystal Cassius had given her for emergencies. But as her hand closed around the crystal, different awareness flickered through her increasingly fractured consciousness. The direct connection she shared with Cassius, temporarily strengthened during the ceremony's confrontation, remained more accessible than usual. More direct than the communication crystal, more secure than messenger, this magical resonance offered potential lifeline if she could focus enough to activate it. Gathering her last reserves of concentration, Lyra directed her remaining mental clarity toward that connection, reaching through the established channel with desperate intensity. No words, no specific communication beyond raw need. Just urgent reaching for the only presence that had demonstrated ability to counter the necklace's influence. The effort cost her final reserves of strength. As consciousness began to slip away, overwhelmed by the necklace's relentless assault, Lyra collapsed against the bed, her body nude and vulnerable, her mind fighting for final fragments of self-determination against the enchantment's crushing pressure. Through blurring vision, she glimpsed movement at her chamber window. Impossible given the tower's height, yet undeniably present as the glass pane slid silently open. A figure entered with impossible grace, moving like shadow given substance. Violet eyes immediately finding her despite the room's dimness. Cassius. He had sensed her desperate reaching, had somehow navigated Pyreholm's complex defenses to reach her tower undetected, had arrived in response to need she hadn't even articulated. His expression transformed from urgent determination to profound concern as he took in her condition. Nude, trembling, clearly fighting some invisible battle that was rapidly claiming whatever strength remained. No embarrassment crossed his features at her undressed state, only focused assessment of the situation's severity.
The necklace,
she managed, the words barely audible as consciousness continued slipping away. Her eyes pleaded what her voice could no longer express. A desperate request for help against an enchantment grown too powerful to fight alone. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Cassius moving swiftly to her side, violet eyes clouding with spirit sight as his hands reached toward the necklace at her throat, his expression reflecting both determination and something deeper, something personal beyond professional concern. Then consciousness failed, leaving her vulnerable form collapsing into waiting arms as the necklace pulsed triumphantly against her skin.